Welcome to Blue Collar Compendium. This week I decided to rebuild the carburetor and then put on a positive fuel shutoff valve. I noticed a few times the cylinder was flooded, and when I tried to start the motor it was hydrolocked, or so full of fuel that the starter can't turn the motor over. On a small enough motor you can usually spin the flywheel backwards to open up the valves and drain the fuel into the exhaust. If you look into these Briggs & Stratton single cylinder motors with Nikki Carbs, fuel flooding is a common issue, and there are many different options to fix this problem. I chose a simple fuel shutoff valve. Fuel sitting in the cylinder can cause premature wear on the motor because it mixes with the oil and negates its lubricating properties, so this needed to be fixed. The carburetor and intake are pretty easy to get off and just require basic hand tools. I was using a 1/4-inch ratchet drive and a 6-in-1 screwdriver. Another reason I like to film my work is sometimes future me forgets how present me disassembled some things, and it's nice to review my video and see how or where I made a mistake in hopes of not repeating it. Before taking this carb apart, I watched a lot of videos on how the Nikki Carb is absolute junk, but I'm going to keep using it until it stops working. Oh yeah, and more bin action. When I opened up the fuel bowl, what I found looked like sawdust and peanut butter with pepper mixed together. It was nasty, and it was just coating all the insides of the carburetor. And it's a wonder this thing ran at all. Carb cleaner and a wire brush to the rescue. Man, that is a lot of nasty gunk. Whenever I'm disassembling something that's got like a lot of small parts to it, I really like to put a towel down or a t-shirt, some sort of cloth, something that doesn't make small parts roll away easily and also has a high contrast background to help me see what I've got. This works all well and good, just don't forget you can't use a drill on this or you will have a giant mess. Here I carefully removed the old gaskets and made sure to scrape any gunk or broken pieces that had left. And every time you use ethanol fuel, which is at most of the pumps nowadays, you're risking burning up these gaskets because they're not really made for that. So in the future, I'm going to use all clear gas. There's a little protrusion about a 1/4 inch high on the opposite side of what I'm holding on the plastic part of the carb. And what I didn't realize is that pencil diameter size gasket was supposed to go around that. And when I had taken the carb apart, what I had found was it was inside the cavity, so I just assumed that's where it went. And you'll see later on that caused me some problems. Turns out I'll need that little guy later. While I could have a manual or a YouTube video up to reference this, sometimes it's fun to me just to see if I can figure it out. It's kind of like a grown-up puzzle that has like real-world ramifications to it, but it gives me entertainment and allows me to try and figure things out. Here's a good lesson on always checking a part that you're about to put on to make sure that it works. So even though I bought this part brand new and I checked it to make sure that there was continuity, the solenoid valve that I ordered, the brand new one, still didn't work. And then you're about to see my process for checking it. First, I hooked it up to the motor to see if the keyed ignition would actuate the solenoid. Then I checked the ignition switch to make sure there's 12-volt power going to that terminal when the key's on, and then when the key's off, it should be 0. And they both read accurately. Next, I pulled out a 12-volt power supply that I'd made out of some power supply to some piece of electronic equipment that someone had thrown away. And I use this to check to make sure that the solenoid, it's not any of the wiring on the tractor. So I isolate the wiring on the tractor just to see if the solenoid is working or not. And here's where I confirm that this thing is junk. So I decided to test the OEM just to make sure that, or just to see if it works as well, and turns out it works. It's just real slow. So I clean it out and get all of that black gunk out, and it turns out it runs just fine. So I decided to use that one instead. Much better. Since every time I seem to fire this thing up, I get some sort of mouse droppings that come out. So I decided to take the cowling off so that I could look underneath to see if there was a bigger mouse problem than I realized. And boy, what did I find. So the right answer probably would have been to replace that cable, but I opted instead to use electrical tape and just coat the whole wire so that it doesn't accidentally arc in the future. Reassembly was pretty straightforward and fairly easy, and thanks to my bins, which helped keep me organized. So this air filter doesn't look too bad, but it is full of mice droppings and some insulation, so I just decided to replace it anyways. Start off fresh. Here you can see I crank and crank on the motor with the choke on and the valve open. I inspect to make sure that the new fuel filter is flowing with fuel, which it is, and still nothing. So only thing I can figure out is, or only thing I can think is that even with the choke on, it's just not pulling enough fuel to where it needs to go, and either it's blocked in the carburetor or there's not enough vacuum to pull the fuel where it needs to go into the carburetor. So at this point I stop filming and I take everything back apart. I strip the carburetor all the way back down, being careful not to nick any of the gaskets. I looked through it. I even watched another YouTube video just to make sure I didn't mess up, and lo and behold I did. I had that one gasket pushed down in the hole in the carburetor, not on that protrusion which I spoke about earlier, and after putting it on there, it then created that vacuum seal which it needed to start the motor. However, I didn't film any of that, so you only get to see the result of me cranking it over after I got everything back together. Runs like a champ, sort of. Well, that's it for this week. Stay tuned next week as Lil Red gets an accessory to help me do some home maintenance a little easier. Also, I want to thank Josh for giving me valuable feedback to help improve my videos. So if you guys have anything you think would help improve my content, please let me know and leave a comment. It's just only going to make me better. Thanks for watching.